Since the 1940s, the Ad Council has been the leading producer of public service announcements. Of the thousands of commercials they have produced, there's one particular campaign that really stands out. And they titled it their "Don't Almost Give" campaign. One ad shows a man with crutches struggling to go up a flight of concrete stairs. The narrator says, "This is a man who almost learned to walk at a rehab center that almost got built by people who almost gave money." After a brief pause, the announcer continues, "Almost gave. How good is almost giving? About as good as almost walking." Another ad shows a homeless man curled up in a ball on a pile of rags. One ratty bed sheet shields him from the cold. The narrator says, "This is Jack Thomas. Today someone almost brought Jack something to eat. Someone almost brought him to a shelter, and someone else almost brought him a warm blanket." After a brief pause, the narrator continues, "And Jack Thomas? Well, he almost made it through the night." Another ad shows an older woman sitting alone in a room staring out a window. The narrator says, "This is Sarah Watkins. A lot of people almost helped her. One almost cooked for her, another almost drove her to the doctor, still another almost stopped by to say hello. They almost helped. They almost gave of themselves. But almost giving is not the same as giving at all." Each of these ads ends with that simple, direct message: don't almost give. Give. In our gospel this evening, Jesus tells us the parable of the man with the talents, and how Jesus challenged those three men to use those talents, to each to his own ability. And we just heard, that the one man with talent buried it. He buried it because he was afraid he almost used his talent. And once again this weekend, we're challenged in that second reading to stay alert and sober, for the day of the Lord will come when we least expect it. So stay alert is the challenge, and not bury the gifts that have been given to us out of fear. Stay awake, the readings tell us, and don't almost give. The last few weeks, a great deal has been written on the life of Apple founder Steve Jobs. You might be familiar with the new biography by Walter Isaacson. If you read that, you realize that Steve Jobs was certainly a very unique individual with an extremely complicated personality, to say the least. But he made one very interesting statement that resonates with our scriptures this weekend. He wrote this: "Remembering that I'll be dead soon is the most important tool I've ever encountered to help me make the big choices in life. Because almost everything, all external expectations, all pride, all fear of embarrassment or failure, these things just fall away in the face of death, leaving only what is truly important." Leaving only what is truly important. So what is truly important in life? What gives life meaning? I suggest that what gives life meaning is more what we give to life than what we take from life. I suggest that what gives life meaning is how we use our gifts and talents to make some kind of contribution to life, rather than waiting around for life always to do something for us, or being afraid of life, being afraid of using our talents, never taking any risks. So often, too often, we almost give to life because of our tremendous fear of failure. We become paralyzed by that possibility, so we almost enter into life by almost taking risks. But something we all have to learn at some point in our lives is that failure is an important part of life, and often the only way that we stop almost living. That we have to be willing to fail, and we have to be willing to start over again and again. Thomas Edison, he filed an impressive 1,093 patents with the U.S. Patent Office. And behind each one of those 1,093 successes lay hundreds and sometimes thousands of failures. But Edison mastered the art of recovering from failure, and he shared that art with his workers. Near the end of one of his workers' career, by the name of Alfred Tate, this is the letter that he penned to Edison. He wrote to him, "Above all, you taught me not to be afraid of failure, that scars are sometimes as honorable as medals." And there's a fellow by the name of R.O. Bleckman, who was one of the most famous illustrators in the world. And he wrote a recent book that's entitled Dear James, Letters to a Young Illustrator. And in these letters, he shares a letter that he wrote to a young beginner about the reality of failure. And he wrote, "Preliminary drawings and sketches often are discouraging things, pale shadows of one's bold intentions. Seemingly nonsense, they're especially dispiriting for beginners. Is that what I did, the novice might ask, and I consider myself an artist? Speaking for myself, but also for other illustrators, I'm sure, my trash basket is full of false starts and failed drawings. There should be a museum of failed art. It would exhibit all the terrible art that would have ended up in trash bins and garbage cans, lost and unknown to the public life." He also, in this book, makes another very interesting point about the Scriptures, about the Bible. He calls the Bible a book, a museum of failed discipleship. Because he points out that over and over again, the Gospels record all the false starts and all the spiritual failures of the disciples. But thankfully, they also record Christ's willingness to encourage and to challenge his very flawed disciples. Too often, I think, we have that tendency to cover up the faults of our heroes. And even more so, we have that tendency to gloss over our own colossal flops. I found Rick Perry's response to his colossal flop of this week rather interesting as he made fun of himself. But instead, the Gospels allow us to see the disciples' failures and flaws and flops, but also that they took risk after risk, and they didn't almost give or almost live. Each one of us has been gifted with many talents. And too often, fear keeps us from taking risks in life. We bury the gifts God has given to us. We almost enter into life. We almost enter into marriage. We almost enter into or give to our neighborhood, our church, our schoolwork, all of which demands sacrifice and tremendous risk. But almost giving just doesn't work. It's really a waste of all that God has given to each one of us. John Piper wrote a book called Bloodlines, and this is what he says. He says, "One of the lessons I've learned in 6.5 decades of life is that very few dreams should go on hold while you improve the shortcomings of your life. To be sure, there are times when you need to stop what you are doing and focus on conquering a flaw. But if you wait till all your shortcomings are remedied, your dreams will die. Because all of our advances are with a limp. If you wait till you are beyond criticism to pursue your dream, you'll never do it. You won't marry or stay married. You won't decide to have children or raise them. You won't take your first job or keep it. You won't go into the missions or stay there. Few things paralyze people more than their own imperfections. And there are always people around to remind you of your flaws and suggest you can't move forward until you're better. If you have the chance to read Steve Jobs, the biography by Walter Isaacson, you'll discover that he took a lot of crazy risks. And whatever we might think of his personality or his very erratic behaviors, he never almost lived. He used his talents, and he was not afraid of his imperfections or his flaws. Each one of us, according to our unique talents and gifts, is called to make contributions to life. Let's not us allow that fear of failure or our imperfections or our flaws to keep us stuck in almost living or almost giving.